In the heart of West Africa, centuries ago, a legend rose from the soil of kings and warriors. This was a kingdom cloaked in power and mystery, where rulers commanded with iron hands and armies thundered across the land. Yet, what set Dahomey apart was not its monarchs, nor its wealth, but its warriors. For here, the battlefield was not the dominion of men alone. Here, women bore the sword, the spear, and the musket, fighting with a ferocity that carved terror into the hearts of their enemies. They were called Mino, our mothers, by their own people, and Amazons by foreigners who struggled to comprehend their might. Their discipline was unbreakable, their war chants rolled like thunder through the forests, and their blades flashed like fire in the night. To Dahomey's foes, they were demons made flesh. To their kingdom, they were guardians, protectors, the very lifeblood of survival. What began as whispers in the shadows grew into legends told across oceans. Soon, the world would come to know them as one of history's most extraordinary armies. This is their story, the tale of the Dahomey Amazons, Africa's fearless women warriors who defied empires. In the heart of West Africa, centuries ago, a legend rose from the soil of kings and warriors. This was a kingdom cloaked in power and mystery, where rulers commanded with iron hands and armies thundered across the land. Yet, what set Dahomey apart was not its monarchs, nor its wealth, but its warriors. For here, the battlefield was not the dominion of men alone. Here, women bore the sword, the spear, and the musket, fighting with a ferocity that carved terror into the hearts of their enemies. They were called Mino, our mothers, by their own people, and Amazons by foreigners who struggled to comprehend their might. Their discipline was unbreakable, their war chants rolled like thunder through the forests, and their blades flashed like fire in the night. To Dahomey's foes, they were demons made flesh. To their kingdom, they were guardians, protectors, the very lifeblood of survival. What began as whispers in the shadows grew into legends told across oceans. Soon, the world would come to know them as one of history's most extraordinary armies. This is their story, the tale of the Dahomey Amazons, Africa's fearless women warriors who defied empires. The story of the Dahomey Amazons begins not with a single battle, but with a spark, an idea that women, too, could walk the warrior's path. The roots of this tradition lie partly in legend. Some say it began with female hunters who roamed the forests, armed with bow and blade, feared for their endurance and deadly skill. Others whisper that the earliest Amazons were palace guards, chosen to protect the king because they could not be bribed by rival chiefs or swayed by seduction into treachery. Whatever the truth, by the late 1600s the kings of Dahomey recognized something greater in these women. King Hugbaja, one of the kingdom's early rulers, is often credited with shaping them into an organized force. At first, they were few in number, an elite corps who stood closest to the throne, sworn to defend the monarch at all costs. Yet even in small ranks, their presence inspired awe. Unlike men, these women were bound by oaths of loyalty and vows of celibacy. Their lives were no longer their own, they belonged entirely to the king. They severed ties with husbands, children, and families. In return, they gained a rare power for women of their time, the right to fight, to command, to stand as equals, and often even as superiors, to men on the battlefield. As Dahomey grew in strength, so too did this corps of women. Their fame spread across the land, daughters of the kingdom who shed their blood for the king's glory. To some, they were guardians. To others, they were a warning, a terrifying omen of war. For in these warriors, Dahomey had forged a weapon unlike any other. And soon, the world would come to fear the women who were called the king's wives, but lived as the kingdom's most ruthless soldiers. The kingdom of Dahomey lived in constant peril. Rival states, hostile tribes, and ambitious foreign powers all sought to test its strength. In this climate of danger, an extraordinary transformation took place, one that defied both gender and tradition. Out of necessity and ambition, Dahomey forged an army unlike any other, a corps of women warriors. The exact origins of this force remain debated. Some trace their beginnings to royal bodyguards, female hunters and elephant tamers bound by loyalty to the king. Others see their roots in Dahomeyan religion, where powerful female deities embodied creation and destruction alike. Whatever the spark, by the 18th century, these women had evolved into a disciplined, organized military elite. Their rise was not symbolic, it was practical. Dahomey needed fighters, and women filled the role with unmatched ferocity. From adolescence, recruits endured brutal training, wrestling, weapons mastery, and long marches without rest. They scaled uncovered walls, learned to fight hand to hand, then fired muskets with deadly precision. Sworn to celibacy and absolute loyalty, their lives were bound entirely to the king and to war. Soon, they became the kingdom's most fearsome weapon. European observers described them with awe and dread, women who charged into battle singing war songs, their faces painted, their machetes flashing in the sun. They fought without hesitation, often surpassing male regiments in courage and discipline. To Dahomey's enemies, they were demons in human form. To their people, they were the very embodiment of devotion and strength. The rise of this army of women shocked the world, overturning the expectations of countless societies where women were confined to the home. In Dahomey, they became both shield and sword, the guardians of the kingdom and the executioners of its will. What began as necessity grew into legend, a testament to Dahomey's might and to the power of women to shape the destiny of nations. Life within the ranks of the Dahomey Amazons was as demanding as it was extraordinary. These women did not live as ordinary subjects of the kingdom. Chosen often in their teenage years, they left behind family, marriage, and motherhood. From that moment onward, their lives belonged to the king alone, shaped by discipline, sacrifice, and the unyielding rhythm of military life. Training was brutal. Recruits were drilled from dawn to dusk in every art of combat. They marched in perfect formation, wrestled barehanded, and scaled walls covered in thorns. Muskets, bows, and machetes became extensions of their bodies. To harden their spirit, they endured rituals of endurance, long runs, hunger trials, and ordeals meant to desensitize them to pain and death. Every lesson carried the same truth: the hesitation was weakness, and weakness meant dishonor. Their barracks stood apart from the rest of Dahomey, hidden behind high walls. Inside, they lived in a world apart, bound together by duty. Sisterhood grew strong, but so did rivalry, as each woman fought to prove her worth. Strict laws governed their existence: no husbands, no children, no private wealth. They were forbidden to mix freely with men, preserving their image as warriors first, women second. Yet their sacrifices came with privileges. They enjoyed honors rare for women of their era: access to spoils of war, elevated status in society, and direct access to the king. Victories were celebrated with songs, dances, and elaborate ceremonies, cementing their place as both protectors of the throne and symbols of Dahomey's might. For the Amazons, daily life was a crucible. It stripped them of softness and reforged them into warriors whose very identity was inseparable from the regiment. They were not merely soldiers. They were sisters of the blade, guardians of the kingdom, and living proof of Dahomey's defiance. The Amazons of Dahomey were never meant to remain behind palace walls. Their true purpose was tested on the battlefield, where the survival of the kingdom often hung by a thread. Surrounded by rivals such as the Oyo Empire, the Mahi, and later the Yoruba city-states, Dahomey's expansion and defense depended on the steel of its warriors, and the Amazons were always at the forefront. Their clashes with neighboring kingdoms were fierce and unrelenting. The Amazons became shock troops, leading devastating charges designed to shatter enemy lines with speed and terror. Accounts describe them advancing in perfect unison, chanting war songs, their machetes gleaming in the sun. They struck with such ferocity that seasoned soldiers faltered, shaken by the sight of women who fought without hesitation, without fear of death. The battles against Oyo, Dahomey's most formidable rival, tested their mettle. Oyo cavalry was renowned across West Africa, yet the Amazons faced them with ruthless discipline, sometimes closing in for hand-to-hand combat where their agility and ferocity outmatched the brute force of mounted warriors. Against smaller states, the Amazons were often the deciding factor, overwhelming defenders and returning with captives, symbols of victory and fuel for Dahomey's slave economy. These wars were not fought for survival alone. Each campaign reinforced Dahomey's reputation as a kingdom to be respected and feared. Victories brought tribute, resources, and political leverage, while defeats hardened the Amazons' resolve. To enemies, the sight of Dahomey's women warriors was a living warning: here was a nation that defied the natural order of war, making even the bravest men hesitate. Through these clashes, the Amazons secured their place in history, not as myth or rumor, but as soldiers whose blades altered the fate of kingdoms. By the late 19th century, the Amazons of Dahomey had already carved their legend across West Africa. Yet their greatest trial came not from neighboring kingdoms, but from a new kind of enemy, European colonial powers armed with modern weapons and driven by conquest. Among them, France fixed its gaze on Dahomey. The French invasion was more than a clash of armies, it was a collision of worlds. Under King Bihanzen, Dahomey stood defiantly against European encroachment. At his side, the Amazons braced for their most desperate battles. No longer were they facing rival tribes on familiar soil, and now they confronted an empire with artillery, repeating rifles, and soldiers seasoned by campaigns across Africa and Asia. War erupted in 1890 and again in 1892 when France launched its full-scale assault. The Amazons led the resistance with unmatched ferocity. Eyewitnesses recalled them charging into storms of gunfire without hesitation, their war cries rising above the thunder of cannons. Armed with muskets and machetes, they fought with a spirit that no weapon could extinguish. In ambushes and night raids, they struck with lethal cunning, inflicting heavy losses and proving that Dahomey would not yield easily. But courage alone could not withstand modern firepower. French troops advanced relentlessly, their rifles and artillery cutting down regiments that had once terrified all of West Africa. Villages burned, fortresses crumbled, and the Amazons were driven into retreat after retreat. Still, they fought on. French officers, veterans of Algeria and Indochina, expressed awe at their valor, calling the women of Dahomey among the bravest soldiers they had ever faced. By 1894, the struggle was over. Dahomey was absorbed into French colonial rule, and the Amazon regiments were disbanded. Some warriors were executed, others exiled, while many slipped quietly back into ordinary life, carrying the scars of battles that had already entered legend. The Dahomey Amazons may have disappeared as a regiment, but their spirit continues to resonate into the modern age. They live not only in the chronicles of history, but also in the imagination of the world, where fact and legend intertwine. In present-day Benin, their story remains a source of national pride. Statues, songs, and oral traditions honor the women who once defended their kingdom with unmatched devotion. They are remembered as ancestors who proved that courage knows no gender, and that loyalty to one's land can echo across generations. Beyond Africa, the Amazons have inspired historians, writers, and filmmakers. From scholarly studies to cinematic portrayals, they are imagined as enduring symbols of resistance and empowerment. Their influence reaches into global popular culture, where warrior women, whether drawn from history, legend, or fantasy, carry traces of their legacy. The Amazons of Dahomey stand as proof that reality can be as extraordinary as myth. Their story is more than a tale of war, it is a reflection of resilience. They remind us that legends are not born from imagination alone, but from real lives lived in defiance of limits. The Amazons of Dahomey were such lives. Though centuries have passed, their echo endures, both inspiration and warning, etched forever in memory as women who fought not only for a king, but for a place in history itself. The Amazons of Dahomey remind us that history is never as simple as the stories we inherit. They were not myths or distant fantasies, they were women of flesh and blood who chose a path of discipline, loyalty, and war. Their lives were bound to the throne of Dahomey, yet their legacy reaches far beyond its fallen walls. In their own time, they unsettled the world's expectations. To enemies, they were demons in human form, to their people, they were protectors and symbols of pride. Today, they endure as proof that courage and leadership are not bound by gender. They shattered assumptions and left a lesson still urgent that power, once claimed, can alter the course of nations. History often forgets the voices of women, but the Amazons cannot be silenced. They march through memory as fierce daughters of the past, guardians of a story that refuses to fade. Though their battles ended more than a century ago, their spirit endures, reminding each generation that bravery wears many faces, and that legends are not born of destiny, but of choice.